right, so,
There are multiples in here.
well, all set?
Yes.
I'll call this meeting to order. It's 5 o'clock, Monday, the 12th of July, school board meeting. Call this meeting to order. First thing we have on the agenda is consent agenda for the June 21st, 2021 school board meeting minutes. I'll entertain a motion to accept as posted.
Make the motion.
Could I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Can I just look to, can I just,
Oh, yep, sure, sorry.
because there is something on there. Sorry, I'm in the middle of signing stuff.
Actually, I was looking for the Zoom link.
That's what I was doing when I first started.
Wait a minute.
Sorry, I'm good. I apologize.
You're good? Okay. So we've got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion passes 5-0. No roll call, not on Zoom. I did, before we, this wouldn't be consent agenda, but I'd like to, I had an email from a parent regarding the minutes from May 17th, 2021. It's a misspelling of Evan Payette's first name. So I'd like to ask that we edit the first name. It was spelled originally Ivan, I-V-A-N, and it should be Evan, E-V-A-N. So I'd like to offer that correction. And again, that was the May 17th, 21 school board minutes. So I'll entertain a motion to accept that. Or
I'll make a motion to change Ivan to Evan, E-V-A-N, yet, on the May 17th, 21 minutes.
Can I have a second, please?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much for in that correction. Next thing on the agenda is a review of the manifest. The manifests are going around. So please take time to sign those. We did get it's not on the agenda, but we did get a board report from Patricia Browns. So if you've had a chance to review it, she's actually going to go more in detail with us at the next board meeting. But between now and the next board meeting, please take a look at that. Unless you have specific questions for Bill that Bill can take back to Patty, I'll move on in the agenda.
Like 50 pages.
Yeah, it's pretty extensive.
She put the whole
Printed the whole thing, yeah.
thing.
So, any questions? If not, we'll table that to next board meeting, and Patty will be back with us to do a report.
Okay.
Let's see, moving on to unfinished business, Lakeway Committee. Anything to report, Erica or Matt?
I had a child,
No,
8 pounds, 4 ounces, 21.5 inches long.
Future Lakeway.
Very
student.
healthy. She'll be a Lakeway leopard, and that has prevented me from making meaningful progress in between this last meeting and this current.
But you did have a chance this evening to meet Henry.
I did get a chance to meet Henry, so that's
Henry
progress.
is asked to be involved in that committee.
Yeah,
as
the
well,
only
so-
brave soul so far, Henry. Thank you very much.
So,
As soon as Matt gets it together.
Yeah, as soon as I get my stuff together,
all right,
we'll be in a good spot.
we'll give you a pass on this one.
Thank you kindly. I appreciate that. Again,
All right. Proceeding on the agenda, we have new business. We have the Horizon Engineering presentation. Kathy, welcome. Kathy Conway from
Thank you.
Horizons.
Thank you. It's nice to see all of you.
Nice to have you back.
And so I am here to give you an update on where we are with looking at parcels for a new elementary school.
Sure. Henry and Heidi and Dale, if you guys want to come around so you can see, I have no objection to you guys coming around so you can see the presentation if you'd like.
Okay. So, in 2020, we started taking a look at property owned by the daughters off of Grove Street and Crane Street. They had offered some property with the school district. And prior to that, I think back in 07, 08, we had also looked at the Greenwood Acres up here off of Oak Hill Ave. So what we have done is most recently in March of this year, we took another look at the Greenwood Acres property so that we could update it to 2021 numbers, make sure that we had the same school and field configuration on each of the sites so that we were really comparing apples to apples. And all we looked at were construction costs for the site. You know, what site improvements were needed, what off-site improvements to municipal infrastructure might be needed as well, again, just trying to get that apples to apples comparison for you. So I thought I'd just give you a brief update of kind of the highlight of the findings for each of those sites, and then sort of run through the comparisons of how those two sites compare to one another. So this is the daughter's property. This is the whole property. Their facility is up here, and they had offered about 17 acres to the district down in this area. And while the daughter's is accessed by Grove Street, the easiest way to get to this developable area is right off of Crane Street. So that's a pretty easy access off of Crane Street. You can either come off of Cottage Street or Route 302 over here to access Crane Street. So there are two access points for that. We also, as part of this plan, recommended that we do an emergency access so that the school would have 2 points of entry and exit. So we would have the main entrance there, and then we would have a gravel access, emergency access out the back here. And this Moran Street is a paper street, so it doesn't exist. It would need to be built, but there is a right-of-way in there off of Crane Street. So that's what we looked at for access to this site. In terms of water and sewer, there is an 8-inch water main that actually runs through our development here. So that water line would have to either be lowered or relocated. But in speaking with Tom Considine at Water and Light, the pressure and supply are adequate to supply a school building on this site. In terms of sewer, there's a fairly new 12-inch sewer on Crane Street. And so that's a pretty short distance to connect to. But as best we could gather, the sewer then goes from there down towards Cottage Street, and that's an older sewer line, likely needing some improvements. The town's been going through a process of looking at all of their sewer lines and, is there infiltration? Is it old clay pipe? Is it undersized? Whatever. So while there's a nice 12-inch on Crane Street, there is some concern about the sewer line that we would connect to downstream. And the other thing we looked at is walkability. Just, is there a sidewalk? And for this particular parcel, where Crane Street comes out onto Cottage Street down near Woodsville Guarantee Savings Bank, that's where the sidewalk ends. So we'd want to extend the sidewalk up Crane Street to the main entrance. So we included that in our analysis as well. In terms of the site itself, we did do a series of borings to determine if ledge was present, because that's always a concern in our granite state. And also because in order to create level area, while we try to balance the cuts and fills, we do have some areas that there's, a 10-foot cut, other areas there's only a 3-foot cut. So ledge is important to know. And we did 11 ledge borings on this site, found ledge between 2 to 10 feet deep. So there will be some ledge removal on this site. While we did not officially delineate the wetlands on this parcel, we did have some of our project engineers go out to the site, and these green areas, there are some wetlands in some of these areas. And so what we did is we tried to estimate how much would be impacted. And so we've got about 4,000 plus 5,000. We've got about 9,000 square feet of wetlands that would potentially be impacted. And that's important because the 10,000 square foot is kind of a threshold where you have to go from a minor to a major impact. So that's the field investigation that we did. And then we did an opinion of cost for this scenario and included items again, site work, the clearing, we put in a number like 2,000 cubic yards for ledge, the crushed gravel, the gravels to build the roads, the water line, the sewer main connections, gate valves, stormwater detention. We've always got to have a treatment or detention pond, so we're looking at, potentially a couple areas there. Construction of just a gravel emergency access, and then some landscaping, signage, site lighting, and then the off-site improvements that I mentioned earlier with the sidewalk. And the total construction cost was about 2.842. I really need my glasses for this one. Sorry about that. So yeah, the total construction cost with all those things taken into consideration was $2,842,200 for this scenario on the sister's property. The next thing we did is we took what had been done on the Oak Hill Avenue property and took a look at it to make sure that we still met today's standards for some of the design pieces, and then also updated the construction cost for that project. So here's Oak Hill Ave, Lilac Lane. We would need to construct a road from that intersection up into the site. And then our second egress would come out here on Elm Street. There's a right of way between some of these developed lots up there. So that's what we were looking for this property. And while the fields might be in slightly different locations, we were very careful to make sure that we had the same building layout, same number of parking spaces, so that again, you can compare apples to apples. This particular site, we did map out, delineate all of the wetlands. And so these are the wetland areas. And as you can see, there's more impact with wetlands on this particular parcel. More than 10,000 square feet. So that bumps you up into a major impact, and mitigation will likely be required. We also did borings on this property, ledge borings, so that we knew what we were up against. And the same thing as with the other site, the ledge depth was 2 or 3 feet down till we didn't hit any when we went down, 10 or 12 feet. So again, ledge is on both properties. In terms of access for this property, as I mentioned, off Oak Hill is really the best access point. And then you've got the secondary point over here off of Elm. We did propose, there are some narrow roads. Oak Hill Ave, it's pretty wide right out here, but it does narrow down in some sections. So we proposed some widening along Oak Hill Ave. Sidewalks. We have got sidewalks. There's an existing sidewalk that goes for a distance along Oak Hill Ave. So we're proposing to continue that sidewalk from the intersection of Oak Hill and Elm up to the school site. Water. In reading through some of the old reports, one of the things of concern with this water pressure was water pressure up here, because it's at a height of land. And so there was a suggestion of creating a loop so that you've got water coming from 2 directions. But we did not do any hydrant testing to know if there's adequate pressure. But this loop will help with existing conditions in terms of redundancy, water coming from two directions. So we have that, we did show that water main loop. Sewer, there is sewer available at the end of Oak Hill Ave. And again, we had difficulty in getting exact information on the condition of that sewer line. But some of this is newer sewer. So when this goes further, we should take a closer look at that sewer and see really what you've got out there. We just didn't have that available as part of this study. We were just kind of looking at concepts. This particular parcel is about 29 acres out of the larger parcel that's up there. And again, just like with the other site, this grading, you know, we've got some fills in the back corner, we've got some cuts. So again, we're balancing cut and fill, but we do have some 10-foot cuts, which means ledge is going to be, you know, we're going to be impacted by ledge here as well. And so we had performed an updated cost estimate on this parcel. And that cost. Yes. Okay. And again, looking at some of the same items that we looked at before, the clearing and grubbing, we used 2,000 cubic yards of ledge on this one as well because they seemed like pretty similar. You know, the paving and the gravels, sewer manholes, sewer line, water main, the stormwater detention. We show some possible areas for that, stormwater detention, culverts. And again, we kept the signage, site lighting, landscaping, those kind of items the same for both parcels. Off-site improvements included widening the road that I talked about, sidewalk along Oak Hill from Elm, and then some granite curbing. And the price, rounded total construction cost for site work and some of the off-site improvements for this was $3,572,500. And so the next thing I did was I said, well, let's look and see what the differences are between those two parcels to sort of explain the differences in those costs. What made up the differences? So one of the biggest things is the access road. Here we've got an access road that is about 2,780 linear feet, 2,780 linear feet from Oak Hill Ave to Elm Street. Whereas on this parcel, we just had a very short 100 feet to come off of Crane Street. So that's one significant difference between the two parcels. Another difference is for Greenwood to connect to the sewer main. The sewer line ends on Oak Hill Ave. So we're going to have to run an 8-inch sewer up to here. And so that's about 1,300 feet of sewer versus at the Daughters, the sewer main, we've got a sewer manhole right here, an existing sewer manhole right here. So we're running about 420 feet of sewer. In terms of water, as I mentioned earlier, we've got this water line going right through our development. So we're going to have to relocate, lower, we're going to have to deal with that water line. And then we've also got about 450 feet of water to get from the water main on Crane Street to the property. Greenwood Acres, as I mentioned before, we've got to create this loop, which is about 2,300 feet. So there's the difference in the amount of water main that needs to be installed.
So how much on the daughters?
How much on the?
How many feet on the daughters?
On the daughters, we've got to relocate that 500 feet, and we've got to put in 450 new feet. In terms of the off-site improvements, again, it's very conceptual at this point with the sewer. We know we need some sewer improvements either way. We know I believe we need to have a sidewalk from like Woodsville Guarantee Savings Bank up to the daughters, and from Oak Hill and Elm up to here. So there's sidewalk improvements on both sides. I know we tried to look at how bus traffic would flow and how passenger vehicles would flow and that kind of thing. There's, as we mentioned, this is pretty narrow right here. You probably want to widen it. One thing that's nice about this particular parcel is if you wanted, you could have some of your, you could have a bus route coming in from Cottage Street or from 302. There's two good access points to this site, or have parental drop-offs, either way. And I mean, the same goes for this. Again, you're going to have a good access point here and a good access point here. So you've got some options there for the parent drop-off, students driving, whatever. But there will likely need to be some off-site road improvements. We estimated the ledge to be about the same at both sites, 2,000 yards. Until we know exactly where everything is going, and we didn't do ledge probes at all the building corners because we didn't know where the building was going to go at that time. There were some changes, but there's going to be ledge. We talked about the wetlands. We've minimized the wetlands impact, but this will impact more than 20,000 square feet, be a major wetlands impact. All of it's doable. It's all just a matter of the design process and the process of getting the approvals. They look to have you minimize wetlands impact. So basically the bottom line is looking at all of those items and what contributed to the cost differentials. There's about $650,000 difference between the two sites, with the daughters being the less expensive. And again, I want to reiterate that this is conceptual. This is really done so that you can get a comparison of the two sites. It's not so you can go home and say, it's going to cost us $8 million for the site work for this property, because, the more information we have, the better those cost estimates can be. But I feel like we compared apples to apples for you so that you could really take a look at the advantages and disadvantages of each site and, allow you to make a decision based on that.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Kathy?
I have a couple. So the wetlands mitigation, 20,000 square feet plus, how, in your estimate, what is that going to cost? Because if you don't have land to swap, you have to walk out the coin.
Right. There's when you're over that threshold, you have to either pay money into the state fund, or you have to create have wetlands available elsewhere.
So what's your estimate for the cost of that? It's not included in here. Right?
No, it's not, because I think at this point I felt like it was too preliminary for me to really say exactly how many square feet, and the cost is, the application, the cost to do that, creation or paying into the ARM fund is, I don't even want to venture a guess because, I think that they would look at a developer differently than they would look at a school district. And then what's the value of these wetlands? I don't know if they're high value wetlands at this point. High value wetlands, they're more concerned about making sure that we're creating something else similar to that. So you're absolutely right. I did not put in a figure for any wetlands permitting or payment to the ARM fund or whatever, just noting that this particular site would likely require that.
The other question I have is with water pressure that you mentioned. So how confident are you that there would be enough PSI on the site for fire suppression
Yep.
reasons?
So based on conversations with Tom Considine, I believe that this loop that we're creating will provide adequate pressure and adequate fire flow. But we did not do any fire flow analysis or testing or hydrant testing to confirm that.
You feel confident though that the daughter's pressure would provide enough to meet that criteria?
Yes, yeah, and the reason that Tom, felt confident about that is because, we're down here at like elevation 960, 950, and the daughter's property is up here at a higher elevation. And he had some data on this water line going through here. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but he had some data that was indicative that had adequate pressure and adequate fire flow.
My concern, because I work at the hospital, is we have to add a water tower.
A water tower,
And
yep,
a fire pump.
Yep.
And that was big bucks.
it is. But yeah, like I said, in conversations with Tom, he felt like creating that loop was the key for that site to get the adequate water.
I think at one point too, Henry, they had talked about, and I don't know if it was for water or for sewer, maybe Dale remembers, but I think at one point they talked about tapping into Tuck Lane. And then I believe, if you go to those, I don't know what direction it is, but if you keep on your paper, if you were to go to the top of your page,
Yep.
I don't know if it's Brickyard Road that runs to the back. There's another access point somewhere, and I can't remember if it's Brickyard. Or Far Hill, thank you, Far Hill.
Yep.
That comes in, and I think at one point there was discussions about whether or not the water and sewer was gonna be better to grab off of Oak Hill or grab off of Far Hill in the Tuck Lane area. So I don't know if that would make much of a difference either in that, so. But I don't remember if that was for water or if that was for sewer, or if it was for both, but I do remember them saying that was another option or another potential option for that property. The only other question I have is, and again, I'll call on anybody from here. The Greenwood Acres, was it 29 acres that we were looking at purchasing? I didn't think it was that many acres. Does anybody remember?
7, I thought.
Oh, okay, I'm not sure.
Roughly.
27?
27.
I thought it was less than 29. So I don't know, what I'm questioning is whether or not any of those wetlands were in the property portion that we weren't going to buy.
Well, I think that the
Or that we weren't
impacted
offering.
one, it probably doesn't significantly change the
Okay.
impacted ones. I would suspect that this property line might move up closer to this road because you probably don't need that or proposed.
Okay,
property
just
lines.
curious as to whether or
Yeah.
not that would change anything with the wetland impact, so.
Yeah, I mean, like, that's part of why we looped this road up around to get around this wetlands. Obviously, it's a shorter distance to go straight between 2 points. But we knew that we could never get away with that wetlands crossing, so we did loop it up around, and tried to minimize as best we could.
Okay, thank you very much.
Am I allowed?
Yeah,
Oh,
please.
I just have a question, because it's all new again, but a couple of years ago, when this was presented, the Greenwood Acres, And I believe the other space, I'm not sure, but there was so many acreage per student or per enrollment, I think there was. And has that changed?
I think that per our student population, you had to have a minimum. I don't know that there was a range, but it had to be a minimum. I think it was,
You have to start with 5,
Start
and
with-
then
Right.
1 acre for every 100 kids.
That's right.
okay.
So what is the,
So that would put us at basically around 8 or 9 acres would be the requirement by the state for the property, and both properties will well exceed that.
okay.
Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
I know before, there was question on the property that was gifted to the school.
Yeah.
Was not enough acres, but now it's enough acres?
Yeah, it always was. It was just a question whether or not it was gonna give us everything we wanted. If you added in the
Okay.
fields, if you added in the, the playgrounds and the
Okay.
parking, whether or not 17 was gonna be enough. And I think when they laid out the design and moved it around, they did show
Okay.
that they could put the same amount of fields or the same amount of facilities in that space.
And I know before, when we analyzed that property off of Grove Street, there was questions with the bus, but you feel confident with Crane Street and off of 302, the buses going in, instead of going up Grove Street, because that was a big,
Yeah,
last time, big no.
when we first looked at this parcel, we were looking at Grove Street because that was the access to this parcel. But when we went out and took a closer look and saw where Crane Street was in proximity to this parcel, it really made sense. And I mean, we do have to be careful because there is some there's some potential wetlands and other things down there. But we feel Crane Street is a fairly new, wide, nicely paved subdivision road. So yes, access, off of Crane Street is much better. At Grove Street, there would be some concerns.
So that would be closed off, basically?
Well,
or-
so the sister's parcel is up here
Right.
and Grove Street
Oh, I
is
see, the
over
school would be
here.
down there.
And so we'd be down here on that lower portion of the parcel. So they really have two separate access points without a connection between them, I assume.
Okay.
There would be no reason to connect the two of them. So, yeah.
And Crane Street, you didn't feel needed to be widened like you were talking on Oak Hill?
No, I think it was 20 or 22 feet wide with some nice shoulders on it.
Okay.
So it looked pretty good.
So really the only thing was adding sidewalk,
Sidewalk.
okay, which both of them required that.
Both of them
Yeah.
require sidewalk, yes.
Question regarding sidewalks, Kathy. If we use 302 as an entrance, are we obligated to put a sidewalk for walking? Or would the Crane Street sidewalk suffice?
I believe that you only need a sidewalk. One.
Okay.
That's what my understanding is. I could be wrong. I'm not maybe as up on all the school regulations as you guys are. But, I think the nice thing is that you've got sometimes buses and parent drop-off conflict. So if you forced the buses to come one way or whatever, and I think quite frankly, probably the sidewalk coming off of Cottage Street would more likely be used because I'm not sure how many families are down off of 302 because you're fairly close to the Bethlehem town line once you get out there. So that just seemed like the more logical place to put the sidewalk.
And I think that, is it Morrow Road, that paper road?
Yep, this paper.
I think that there's also another option for Morrow Road to go, instead of coming off Crane, coming off of 302,
Yes.
up where the overpass is, just before the overpass.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a dirt road. I don't know if that is a considerably much longer road, therefore it would be a larger expense.
It is along the road.
Yeah, it is. It would
Because the
be.
way she's going that way, it does connect into Morrow Road,
Right,
but
Yeah.
not as
not as
far.
far out, so, okay.
Yeah, you're right, because it continues, here's
Yeah,
how
I
it
just-
continues
Yeah,
out.
I'm just not sure exactly where it would go out, but.
I don't know if this is helpful in
Oh, yeah.
trying to get some of that. that has a little bit
Yeah,
more
because this is.
on there
the,
than this
This
does.
is that dirt road that's here, so it would be quite a bit long.
Yeah.
Kathy,
Yes.
as far as issues with the butters, is there one site that's more challenging than others? Or is that, what type of challenge is that?
So they're both in residential areas. They both have homes, residential homes in close proximity to the proposed access point. Which abutter is gonna scream louder?
How about the widening of the road? Would we have to be taking kind of land by eminent domain?
No, I think that the town has either a 33 or a 50-foot right-of-way, depending on the age of that road. So the right-of-way width is wide enough in all of these scenarios to add a sidewalk, to widen out things a little bit. Tree removal, there would need to be some tree removal to be able to accommodate, but the town, like I said, either 50 or 33-foot right-of-way in these areas.
And I think you've already answered this, but I just want to ask you, so both sites are extremely viable sites, so
Extremely vital.
viable.
Oh, viable, yes. Yes, I did not read my conclusion for my report, but yes, absolutely. Either site is, let's see what wording I used here. But yes, either site is, the results of our feasibility analysis do not appear to present any constraints that would prevent the development of an elementary school on the site. And that same conclusion for both properties. Obviously ledge is something you have to work through, but it's not something that is a constraint that's insurmountable.
Great, thank you. Any further questions from anyone?
That paper road, you have a cost laid out.
That's included in your estimate? that you gave us,
Yeah, I had, Crane Street. So we had crushed gravel, and excavation for a cost of 13, 24, and 11 is 37, for around $50,000. And that's this stretch of it. That's not, going down any further.
Any questions from any of the members of the board or anyone else here in the audience? Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you
Appreciate
very
your
much.
time and your work. Thank you.
Thank you. And do you all have copies of these reports from March, or should I send them?
I shared it with the
Okay.
facilities committee,
Yeah.
but the links no longer work.
Okay,
If you could resend them, that would be great.
I'll
That would
resend
be great.
the reports so that you have them and can look at them.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Oh, Kathy, this is the one that you passed to me.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, so thank you again. So moving on in the agenda, we have the Lakeway Mechanical Engineering Study. Dale, is that the
Yeah.
Yetton one? Thank you. So we all received the Yetton paperwork. Any questions for Dr. Hart or for Dale regarding this report? And the Yetton report was an infrastructure upgrades at Lakeway Elementary School and Littleton High School, and gave recommendations for the two different schools separately. Dale, the only question I had, and it's just a matter of timing, is that we also had the air quality. Did we share the air quality report with them? Is that our intention would be to share? Because I would imagine it might either add to this proposed list or change maybe potentially some of the proposed list. Okay.
Did you get 2 different quotes on these?
No, we didn't receive any quotes, right? It was just that 9750 at the end.
Correct.
Okay. So there was a proposed fee of $97.50 for Yetton Services and that fee would incorporate what? What exactly would we be getting for that fee, Dale?
So you're gonna be getting an evaluation of everything that's listed on page 1.
Okay.
And what those costs associated would be, and then a remediation plan that would include, you know, if they come back with, you need to upgrade these mechanical components, this is the estimated cost. If you need to upgrade electrical, these are the estimated costs. So that we can put a dollar value. I think one of our goals, and Dr. Hart, please correct me if I'm wrong, when we started this was looking at the CARES funding that we were going to get and what could we realistically do with some of that CARES money to help Lakewood. And I think when we talk about the air quality study during the facilities report, some of that is validated with the concerns that are in that building. The reason why we didn't require or request a second quote is this company has done so much work already at Lakeway. They've got, like, I think this is a really fair price. If we were, because they're able to use past data that they did in early as 2018, if we were to go to another company, they don't have that data to work off from. If you decide as a board we need to get a second quote, we can reach out to an engineering firm, but they have by far the most information on Lakewood already.
Didn't they also do the study on those cracks lately?
Yes, with, in correspondence with Tyree.
Right.
Yeah.
So any questions for Dale regarding the report from Yetton Associates? So tonight, Dale, do we need to basically authorize moving forward with Yetton Associates? Is that really what we're looking at this point? Or do we need to let them see the air quality report and come back to us next meeting with a?
I don't think their price of anything would probably, you know, would possibly go up.
That's what I'm thinking.
I think what we have to decide as a group tonight, and maybe we can bring in the air quality study at the same time, is did we select enough stuff to evaluate, or does the board think that we should do more now that we've seen the air quality study? And then that would affect their price.
Right.
And we met with the project manager from Yetton together, so Henry can correct anything that I'm omitting.
When you look at the air quality report, it's gonna say there's some CO2 issues, particulate issues. And some of what Yetton has proposed here is not included in further study, because what's happened, I believe, is with the particulates and so forth, is the classrooms themselves, where you have those through the wall units, you don't really have the proper air exchanges and filtration like you would need. So if we're looking at utilizing CARE Act for what it's intended, which is to make the air environment and infection prevention a lot better than we have, then we most likely going to ask Yetton to try to summarize for us ways that we can remove those through the wall units and include air filtration as part of air handling units. Where those are located, we have no idea because of the existing roof weight. But I do think at the facilities committee will end up, after discussion, recommending further study as far as the air exchanges for Lakeway in total, rather than just hallways. Did I get that right, Dale?
You did.
Okay.
Just a couple things that are on here.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about replacing the 5 existing unit ventilators that are still due for replacement. Based on the air quality study, I think Henry and I from discussion is replacing the unit ventilators the best use of our money to improve, because even rooms with new ratings, new units had higher ratings than they probably should, depending on whether you look at OSHA or ASHRAE, standards. And then the fire alarm system, we included that because we need to get an updated price. The last price we had was like 6 years ago. It estimated $200,000 to upgrade the fire system, the fire alarm system at Lakeway. So that was part of that. And then while we were talking, for those that don't know, when the CTC was built in 2011, 2012, for some reason or another, and I don't know if it was a cost-cutting measure last minute, but the fourth floor, which heat rises, did not have air conditioning units installed on it. It's got air exchange units, so if it's humid outside, it brings humid air into the classroom. There's no way around that. So we thought, hey, why not? It's minimal for him to, or them to look at that at the same time.
I don't think Gettin's price will change very much from the quote,
No.
just by asking them, oh, by the way, what if we included, air handlers for the classroom? They're gonna give you a budget number. Everyone will have a heart attack like they will. It's the right thing to do.
So does the CARES Act funding cover the price from Yetton Associates, or would that be a different budget line?
So talking with Patty, she said that some of it could. Her recommendation that it would come out of the budget, and then once the work is done, they could validate what would be covered under CARES in this 9,700 and then reverse entry. So I know she's not able to be here tonight. I wouldn't even know where to ask for funding.
Okay.
Like, I don't know if it's a contracted services account for that amount, so.
Any questions from any other member of the board? So again, I'm going to ask real quick, just so I'm clear, what exactly do you need from us this evening, so that we make sure we give what you need to move forward?
I think we need a consensus, or no, I guess not a consensus, we would need a 3 votes to proceed with this quote, and then authorize Dr. Hart and I to work with Patty on a funding source, unless there's one that you name.
Just after this conversation, I'm wondering, does it make sense for the board to go, say, up to $12,000? Or, this is what the quote is, but, so we don't have to be coming back. You had it, and I don't know if you have a thought on how much this additional piece would cost, but I'm just throwing out, it's $10,000 now, you add another couple of $1,000. That would at least give us the flexibility to move forward.
After they've taken a look at this.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to authorize up to $12,000 for infrastructure upgrades at Lakeway Elementary School, the feasibility study of infrastructure upgrades at Lakeway Elementary School and Littleton High School as presented this evening in the Yetton report, which would also give some flexibility for the report that was recently given to us on air quality, as presented by superintendent and the facilities director.
So moved, Larry Blaisdell.
Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Any further questions or comments or discussion from any member of the board? All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Second, Aaron?
Ann was second. And was that aye from everyone?
Yes.
5-0.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Moving on the agenda, we have school reopening document. Dr. Hart.
Yeah, so as we're planning, moving forward with opening up in fall, we have to we submitted, with basically changing names and dates, our report to the state, which had to supply that, or at least substantiate with the federal government for the kids. So we've done that, and that's going through. We have 6 months now, which I don't intend on taking, but we have 6 months now to update our reopening plan to reflect current conditions. So my process right now, part of my reason to bring it here is to get feedback from the board. But my process right now is this, I'm having school nurses take a look at the CDC guidelines and looking at a report. We did, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. The CDC just gave, I think on Friday, an updated school opening report. And so things will probably change more than I actually expected them to in the report. We have just process issues. I have the nurses looking this week or the next couple of weeks. Our administrative team are going to take the CDC guidelines that we just posted on Friday and look at those and start to modify and update our plan. The third thing that we've constructed is a survey to go out to all of the stakeholders. And essentially what it does is it gives them the current plan. It gives them questions around each section of the current plan. Basically, it says, are you satisfied with the plan? And then if not, what are your identified recommendations or can you elaborate on your concerns? So those are kind of the three pieces that I'm looking at right now. As we get closer to the start of school, my suggestion would be either we bring it to a school board meeting or maybe a separate public meeting that I could run where people could take a look at it, ask questions, give us feedback. So, you know, by mid-August, we'd want to finalize that plan. So I'll stop there and just see, is process-wise, does that make sense to the board? Is there anything that you think we may be missing as far as editing of this document?
I don't think so. I mean, I think realistically, we have to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. I mean, things look really good right now. Anecdotally, I hear that the summer school has gone very well to date. I'm sure more than that, but, and they've gone with the no mask requirement, and, you know, in most cases. And so, you know, we just hope that we won't have to go through this all over again. But I think, again, I think it's, we've learned some lessons and we need to be prepared for, you know, either a major resurgence or whatever. And I think we know a hell of a lot more now than we did a year ago. So, but I would say that I'm sure your admin team and your nurses have weighed in on this. I would just continue to seek their advice and feedback. I think it's a good, I think it's a great direction to head.
Maybe just a summation of the CDC guidelines. It's interesting. CDC guidelines come out. I don't know if anyone's had a chance to take a look at them. But they're essentially, Matt's one minute. They're essentially saying that the most important piece is to get all kids back into school face to face. So the CDC has fully embraced that as a concept. And through that, it's through that lens, they're giving their guidelines. So what they're basically saying, you know, and I just saw it for the first time today, so I'm not going to say I'm an expert on it, but if I was going to summarize the key points is one, we're going to get kids back into school full time. That's critically important. The second piece is that, you know, we should try to keep our kids 3 feet apart when possible. If it's impossible to do, then you could be looking at masking, if that was an impossibility. The other piece that they have far more flexibility in than they had in their guidelines before was local control. So if you have very low numbers here, and then that should have, the guidance is that should take a much stronger role than they may have suggested in the past. So, you know, the other thing that if hopefully the public is listening in on this is that they're really advocating, and as I start to send communication out to parents and to teachers, getting vaccinated. It's a huge support factor to have as many people, students, teachers, parents, staff, the more you get vaccinated, the less you would have to take mitigating strategies. So I guess good news is that it certainly looks, our current numbers are at like 1 to 4, so we have at least one single case in Littleton, but it may not be more than that. We have no new cases recently, so at least right now, we're in a pretty good position. Even some of the variants that they've been talking about, that are dangerous variants, there seems to be emerging research that says that the vaccination covers that. So I guess, I have to be drumming, and anything that the school board can do to help is to get vaccinated. We will be taking a look at trying to support people as a school system, maybe having vaccination clinics and that type of thing, so to support folks. But the good news is that, even the CDC is saying, get everybody back to school. And take precaution measures only when necessary.
I would just say we need to be cautious about rationalization. I read the draft of the plan, and the masking policy proposed is different, as Larry alluded to what's happening in the summer. Both the summer school program that we're running in the district and the rec program, which by the looks of it, when I drop my daughter off, has like 80,000 kids at it. And so I worry about presenting a compelling and clear fact-based rationalization for why kids do not have to wear masks inside of those buildings in July, but do have to wear masks inside of those buildings in certain settings, hallways, cafeterias, outlined in the draft, in September. And I don't want our reasoning to be random. The other thought I would say is the CDC and the WHO, World Health Organization, have not always agreed on this stuff, and then the DHHS has sometimes not agreed with either of the others as well. So I think we need to look at a blend of what's there. They're not all in agreement, which makes our job a little bit more complicated. But I think there's no single source of truth, and so we ought to look at what all three are saying, and they're sort of engaged with all three. Because what I worry about too, or I don't worry, I say what I secretly hope, I suppose, is that Sununu comes, the governor comes in and makes another ruling on how things have to be come August, and that contradicts a plan that we've already printed, proposed, sold, voted on, So I think just not to place all of our chickens in the CDC basket, so to speak, and look at all the different authorities, such as they are, and see what they're saying about it.
The only two things that I had made comment was, on the plan that we had in our packet, there was no date or version on here. So I think it's important as we do this that we have a date or a version on, so that any of us or any parent who might have a copy at home, if they have a date on it and all of a sudden we're reporting on something different in August, then they know that they have an old copy, or they need to get an updated copy. The other thing that I think is really important as we get into the summer and closer to the opening of school is being as clear with parents and families as early as possible on what reopening is going to look like. Makes it easier for those parents and those families to plan. And I think that last year was difficult because we were in the mix of everything. And so I think parents and community members were frustrated because it was 1 week away or 2 weeks away, and they were buying school clothes. Did they have to buy masks? Did they have to buy any special, thing for a homeschooling environment or anything like that? So I think to help our community, we need to get that communication out to them as soon as possible. And I'd hate to see us wait until 2 weeks before the doors open to get that plan out finally. So I think as we know stuff, and we know stuff is not going to change pending something catastrophic, obviously, that were to happen, that if we can get that communicated out to the community, that just makes it less stressful, less anxiety on our kids and on our families as we get closer to the school year.
But I do think there are some folks whose enrollment decision depends on the masks.
Yeah.
From what I've heard. So I think as much time and consistency we can give them will be important. And I agree on versioning, because the version I open now just through the web changed the mask policy already from what the draft was given to us on Thursday, so.
Yeah.
Versioning would be good.
The only other thing I guess I have a question is I would assume in your plan, we did for the second half of the year, we had an option for families that weren't comfortable sending their student 5 days a week, even though we opened up and we gave a remote option or what is the plan for the fall? Or is that, if you choose not to send your child in the fall, does it go back to the way it was 2 years ago where that would be considered homeschooling at that point and all the responsibility of the parent and no longer the responsibility of the district? I think we need to clarify that too, because I think we did have a group or several families that up until the end of the school year preferred to keep their children home in a remote option. So I think we need to look at that as well and how we're gonna handle that. And I'm sure that's all part of your plan and what your team is looking at. So, great. Any other questions for Dr. Hart? Comments? Great.
So, just to summarize it, I think that our next, our first August meeting is the 9th.
Yes.
So I'm gonna do my best to try to get a solid draft for the 9th. And maybe we can publicize that as also a public input piece. Then we could turn that around. That still only gives, whatever it is, 2+ weeks before school starts. Or maybe I could do a public session before that and then bring more, basically more like a final draft on the 9th. I can see the benefits of both ways. I don't know if the board has.
I don't have a preference. I think that comes down to you and your administrative team, what you guys are comfortable and what you feel would make most sense. And then involve the board as you feel you need to. So if the board
I think it's
agrees
you
with
have a
that.
draft you're confident with, it should be distributed so that the public has a chance to digest it in advance of that meeting on the 9th, so they can come, prepared to engage. And that's fine.
Okay. All right, great.
All right.
That's
Anything
all.
further on
Thank
the
you.
reopening document?
Nope, that's
Nope.
it for tonight.
All right, so moving on the agenda, we have administrative goals, and I'll turn that back over to you, Dr. Hart. You've got book reading and Sparks Conference.
Yeah, so, one of the things, and this is just a question to the board, is I've done this in the past. Every board member has a copy of this. I'm wondering if people would be willing to just spend 10, 15 minutes at the first maybe 9 or 10 board meetings to just discuss one of the chapters. I think that'll be helpful. First, I think it's helpful for the board because I think that this is going to be kind of a major driver over this year and the next several. There's some of the concepts here, but it's a great model for the parents and for our faculty to see. And again, could be pretty simple, but just what you see is some of the most interesting concepts and move on from there. But I'd like to try to put that on the agenda if people would be comfortable with it.
Board comfortable with that?
I would say if it's not theatrical, I feel like some of the rest of the board, I don't want to out anybody, felt like the workshop that we did with the administration was a little bit forced.
Yeah.
Was sort of intended to be public and theatrical as opposed to necessarily substantive. So if it's substantive and if it's valuable, then I obviously have no objection to that. But if it's sort of to, I don't mean to say make an example, but sort of a showcase of formula, then I don't necessarily know that it's the best use of our time and our guests' time who are coming to be part of the business of the meeting. It could be separate as a working session or whatever the rules and regs of the board permit.
So here's, just to be completely transparent about that, my objective was to have elements of both. And theatrical is not the word that I use. It's a medium for communication. And so every one time that we have a board meeting like this, to have the board discussing things that are impactful for the school, it's not only important for the board members, but it's also important, I think, for the broader public to hear that. So I do think there's a communication piece around that, so I don't want to, that is part of why I want to do this. The second part too is so we can get some of the feedback from the board, because this is going to drive a lot of what we do, and if people have some questions, comments, thoughts on some of the concepts, then that's helpful. So we don't get too far down the road that either people aren't as comfortable with, or may have some suggestions on. So I do think, Matt, it is kind of, there's elements of both.
I just don't want it to be done in a way that is not valuable. And that was my concern with, and it was a different situation with what we did with the staff, because a lot of us felt like, actually some of us felt like, we're not there to do their jobs, right? So for us to try to impose on them how they should be running X, Y, and Z felt sort of improper relative to what the board's role is to set policy and to vote and all the budgetary stuff. So as long as it's in the wheelhouse of what we're meant to do, I've got 1,200 books at home. Anne said she wanted to put on play, so you got it. She's good.
And the only thing I would ask,
Ready to lead that.
the only thing I would ask, Dr. Hart, is as you were going forward with this, if you can give the board enough heads up as to what you want to cover in that meeting, so that we can do whatever we need to do on our own time, as far as whether it's reading, whether it's take notes, just so that we don't get to the meeting and we're not prepared for what you're
Well,
expecting.
I was thinking, do you want us to read chapter 1 for next meeting? And is it gonna be at the beginning of the meeting or near the end of the meeting?
Yeah.
You know what?
So, I think if we did every other meeting, if we looked at a chapter, that would get us through a good chunk of the year, and just get some of the concepts out there. And again, I do think it's important that the board as you get questioned by the community about where we're going, I think if this helps you be more articulate around, well, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it. So yeah, I would think, if we did a chapter, I think there's 9 chapters in the book. If we took a look at a chapter, again, it doesn't have to be heavy hitting, and I'll try to keep it, so it is relatively simple. It's like, pick out a sentence in the chapter that you think is one of the more impactful sentences. Just to kind of keep it out there, keep it in front of people, keep it in front of the community. So I think we're a little tentative, but we could maybe try it for a couple of meetings.
Sure.
And I'll get your feedback on, how I facilitate that conversation, so it feels comfortable, it feels that it's impactful.
All right, thank you. So Sparks Conference.
The Sparks Conference, again, I think that was kind of one of our launching pieces. We had over 40 people attended the Sparks Conference. It was, again, a lot of what was done there was on this creating a culture of thinking. We've received really pretty positive feedback from staff members. One of the reflections of that is we were going to hold off on giving people there's another book that's Making Thinking Visible, and we were going to wait until August, and people found out we had it and asked for it, and there's been a number of people that wanted to get started early. So I think that's kind of a positive reflection of our launch. That's all I have for that.
Any questions or comments for Dr. Hart regarding that? All right. Moving on the agenda, we have committee reports. Personnel Committee, anything to report?
No.
All right, Facilities Committee,
I have 2 things.
please.
One, we do not have a meeting scheduled. Actually, that's those 3 things. We don't have a meeting scheduled in July. We'll pick up in August. The rock walls are starting tomorrow. So this section of street between school and Maple will be closed. I will go door to door to the local abutters here to let them know. Fire department, police department have been here, done the walk through town. Public Works Director. All support the process. Secondly, which some of you I know I sent on the facilities committee, but the air quality study report, Appendix A, Table 1, I think has a good summation of everything that we gathered for information from Lakeway. So they tested CO2 levels, temperature, relative humidity, dew points, the particulates matter, carbon monoxide, and then kind of, you have multiple standards that you can follow. OSHA is by far the most conservative. For instance, a carbon dioxide rating under OSHA that's considered normal is 5,000 parts per million. ASHRAE, which deals with refrigeration, AC, and heating society, is 1130, or 700 parts per million greater than the outdoor air sample. So on the day of the testing, the outdoor air sample for parts per million of CO2 was 430. So that's where the 1130 comes from. I think it's important to state publicly that there were no mold spores found in Lakeway in any of the buildings. In fact, all of the spore samples that they had taken mimicked outdoor air spores that would have been brought into the building. There was no indoor air spores that were circulating matters. The one, there was 21 rooms tested, and on that page, the table, the outdoor air temperature was 78.3 that day. And this is just a point so the community gets why we're putting so much time and effort into Lakeway. The coolest classroom that was tested was 75.2 degrees that day. And that was before, most of the testing was done before noon. With the highest temperature, I believe, was 76.8. That's what our kids are learning in, that's what our teachers are teaching in, and there's no way to control that any better than what we do. So if it's hot outside, it's hot in that building. If it's cold outside, it's hot in there because we have heat. But if that's our air quality, that's what's coming into our building, our relative humidity is coming in. Think of how many dollars we're putting into that building in the winter to keep it warm because of all the stuff that's going out the windows at the same time. So I think our kids and our staff deserve better, and I hope that with this engineering study that we can find a better alternative, because that's just not comfortable. But heck, I'm not in there every day, so kudos to them. But imagine when it's 90 degrees and it's 80 degrees in the classroom. Like, it's just not conducive to a good learning environment. Those are the only things. That you're welcome to read the whole report. It's very detailed from RPF, but I thought it was important that the mold spores was negative. And then also there was only one area that had a higher than normal radon, and that's the mole hole, which is it's not surprising. It's underground, really. So that was the only.
And even that was not.
No, it wasn't outside the norm. It was just, most everything was less than like 0.2 or 0.3 parts per million, and that was 4.1. But the standard is 6, so it was still below the norm. So anything that we decide to do is hopefully money well spent to control something. And I think what we're trying to do as a facilities committee is just gather as much data so that we can put forth the best plan to spend the money, and not just start throwing money at things and hope it works. If we can somehow summarize everything, that would be a huge win. So
Dale, you said that all the board did receive a copy of this?
I don't think so. I know Dr. Hart and I talked this morning about maybe trying to link it in the agenda. Is it linked in their agenda? Oh, so it's in your agenda.
Right.
Okay,
Not
so,
with the agenda that was pulled down this afternoon, there's no link to facilities at all.
so if we could get a copy to those board members that don't have it, I know I have a copy, Larry, I think you probably must have a copy. And Ann has a copy, so it looks like Erica and Matt still need a copy. Did all facilities members receive a copy? Including Henry?
Henry, so just the Lakeway members
Right,
and the facilities committee.
okay,
Patty Brown as well, Dr. Hart,
great.
but not the high school or CTC.
It was a very, very, well done report, I thought.
They were extremely great to work with. I think the school district has worked with them in the past. At least the name was already in our vendor list. I'm not sure what they've done for us in the past. But they were great.
Yeah, I think, to me, one of the things that I took out of the report that was really helpful, I think will be helpful for you and your team, is that they were able to identify the room numbers. So if you have a room number that is falling, higher or lower than the other classrooms, and you can at least target those areas to at least bring them closer to what the other rooms are. And I think that will be helpful too, so. Well done, I thought that was really good. Thanks. Any questions for Dale regarding anything this evening? Dale, do we have a date set for the next facilities meeting?
Would
Typically,
you
it's
guys
the
prefer the 6th or the 13th?
I'm gonna be away is the 6th that first week of August? I'll be away that week, so.
I guess we're gonna
we
go
can
for
do
the
the next week.
13th.
Is that?
Larry's gonna be away the
Okay.
13th.
I think I'm good.
We can still Zoom them too, if that's convenient.
Yeah, that would work too. I could always Zoom from where I am. So check with the rest of the team. If the date's better is the 6th, then I can certainly Zoom in.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Anything further for facilities?
No,
No? Okay. Summer work's going well?
very well so far.
Okay.
Parking lot looks great, by the way, at the,
The
Yes,
SAU.
Got
yes.
line today.
We got lines in,
Yeah.
yes.
one by there on the way up to this meeting. Looks great. Long overdue.
All right, moving on to policy committee. Anything for policy committee?
Not yet, but I'm sure it'll be coming through soon.
All right.
The meeting in this.
Say, I know you received some stuff from the New Hampshire School Board
I will.
Association and.
Yeah,
All right, with that, moving on to superintendent's report, Dr. Hart.
Sure, as far as staffing, we're in fairly decent shape. We still have ESOL teachers that we have to fill those positions. We are actively interviewing, and my understanding is we have one or two strong candidates, so hopefully we'll have a good report on that next time we get together. We have elementary behavior coach is posted. Crystal Martin is going through a process around the hiring of that position. And then we have, is it just one custodial position that we're trying to fill? So we do have the assistant principal, the high school, that we'll talk about in non-public. And depending on where we land there, go forward there. So that's the staffing update. As the administrative team on August 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we're going to get together. We have an external facilitator coming in that we've been working with for the last couple of months to put together an agenda. That's a combination of a new team. So there's some team building pieces to that. Also, the 3 goals that we shared with the school board, we will be looking at the action planning as a district and as individual schools. Let me see. So by the time we leave there, we're anticipating that we'll really have a pretty solid plan and a calendar of action planning for the majority of the coming school year. So I'm pretty excited about that. The NESDEC, summer school, I think Larry mentioned it, and I think everything that I've seen, we've launched our summer school well, and kids were attending and having a positive experience. I did talk to John King, who's the head facilitator of the NESDEC report, and he's feeling very good about the progress they're making. complimented our team here, principals at the end of school, where it's crazy. You know, had to be interviewing and sharing information. And some of our local realtors have been really kind with time on some of those pieces and town officials. So he anticipates that he'll be able, the report will be done. It doesn't look like it's going to be done for the 9th, but will be the 2nd, and it will be distributed as a draft to board members by, I think he said he anticipates by the 11th of August. He will come and actually present the findings of the report. And so just for the public, you know, it's taking a look at a far more in-depth enrollment projections. They're looking at all of our facilities and the adequacy and the use of our facilities, looking at what else? The facilities themselves, their you know, the report itself will give us multiple options of how we might be able to better utilize our facilities. So I think in conjunction with some of the other pieces that we're going to talk about today, it's going to be a really good, solid piece of work for us to share with the community and help us make some decisions. And if there are any questions, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Any questions for Dr. Hart? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the agenda to public input. Open public input at this time. Anyone here for public input? Heidi?
A couple of things I wanted to go off with the meeting tonight too, some questions about that, but my question is the hiring process. I've met with Dr. Hart regarding the hiring process over a month ago, and I feel like it's not going in the direction it should be. I feel some positions, we have a committee, some we just hire within with no policy whatsoever in place. And I'm wondering where we stand as a district to have one policy in place and stick with that policy on hiring, because I know there's a lot of conflict of interest in different areas. And I'd like to know how we can rectify this situation, because I think it's a sketchy situation within the district.
I'll ask the policy committee as to whether or not that's on your agenda for policy review.
I mean, I just think there's a lot of,
Yeah, no, we understand.
it's different for every position. It's different for hiring within. It's a committee, not a committee. I noticed the last meeting on the non-public, there was family members that were discussed and people didn't recuse themselves. So I know we need to really buckle down on this, because I know if it was a company, there's a policy and procedure. And I feel like this is the time to do it, because there's a lot of talk and it needs to be fixed. And I've met with Dr. Hart about this, and it's been about a month and I've heard no changes whatsoever.
I believe it was discussed at a previous meeting that we were gonna take a look at everything because we need to be more consistent.
Right.
Not just with that, but there were some other issues too.
Right.
Consistency.
Okay, thank
So
you.
Ann will put it on her agenda.
All right. And it just may make things smoother with everything going on. The other thing, I had a question on, with the summer school program right now, it's normal, is that what it is? No masks, it's just a normal. So why aren't we, as a district, going with normalcy, starting in the fall, and if something happens, pull it back and have that plan A and plan B? But right now, you're telling me there might be potential of students wearing masks. When we come in here, we have basketball. You know, I'm here right now without a mask on, everybody else is. Summer school has no mask. So we're thinking about having masks in the fall or changing the policy. I think it's time to take the Band-Aid off and let's move forward. And if something happens, go to plan B. But right now, I think it's time that the board says, this is the time, we're moving forward in the normalcy of our students and our staff. And then if something does transpire 2 weeks prior to school, then go to Plan B. But right now, everybody needs to go back to normal. I mean, thinking about wearing masks again in the fall, I mean, that's not even acceptable. I mean, you're having summer school right now without students with masks on. So why are we going backwards?
Yeah, so, you know, one of the things about summer school is we did make that decision,
Right.
to get back to as normal as possible. The CDC guidelines that I mentioned tonight just came out Friday. So, and I have, you know, unless the board directs me otherwise, I have no intentions of turning and reversing our policy for summer school. But we do have to decide, as, you know, some of the board members said, gonna take a look at all of the advice that we're getting and then determine what's reasonable. Do you see what I'm saying? So
I
the only
don't
reason-
agree with that, because right now, we're living our lives as normal every day. You go everywhere, it's normal. So we're thinking about now, we're gonna take time to micromanage the situation, basically, and think, okay, well, we should wear masks in the fall or stay 3 feet apart. Our kids are normal right now. They're living a normal life. So pulling that back right now mentally to them, they will not come back, step foot in this building or step foot in Lakeway. You will have a real problem here. Our kids are living a normal life right now. So if I go home and tell my child that's going into 8th grade, there's a possibility of going back to wearing a mask and staying 3 feet apart, I will look for other places for her to go to school. And I'm sure most of the population will in the district. We need to keep it normal. The kids are normal right now. The talk of even thinking about putting a policy in place to go back to what we were going at, or 3 feet apart, 1 feet apart, let's stay normal. I don't even know why this is even a topic now when summer school is normal. This building is normal. Lakeway is normal. Park and Rec is normal. This shouldn't even be a topic. You should have a plan B maybe. God forbid something happens, but let's move forward. We can talk about this until we're blue in the face. Let's move forward.
Thank you, Heidi.
And the last thing I had,
Yep.
Was the new school. What, I know I hound about the estimate enrollment and everything, it's like 600 and something, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Lakeway is approximately 400,
About 350. Yeah.
350?
I think it's sort of split between the 662.
Okay. And in this building here, we can see capacity-wise in classrooms is 1,000 when it was built. Is that still true?
I don't think it was that high yet.
So we've asked this before, or I've asked this before we had the CTC edition. Back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, we had 800 kids here with a smaller building. So I think probably 1,000 is a fairly,
Will
Well, I-
NESDEC have an official ruling on that?
I think it's gonna
Yes,
go
on recommendation.
Will help us out with that.
And when will that report be out?
He said mid-August, right?
Mid-August. Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, I think way back in the 80s, in 1976, Profile was built because this school system took in the kids from Franconia, Bethlehem, Easton,
And they had portables, correct? They had
and we had the
outside.
portables, yes, for years. And so the total enrollment roughly for Littleton was over 1,000 children. So in 1976, when they built Profile, 200 kids from this building left to go home to Profile. So that dropped it back down.
Okay.
And it's kind of, and declining enrollments. I mean, you don't see many people having 6, 7, or 8 kids anymore. It's
Right.
1 or 2, maybe 3 over here.
So has the committee or the board ever thought of doing something with across the street and consult, like making the old Daisy Bronson and the property that we tore down and try to combine all K through 12?
Yeah, Dr. Harvard actually brought that as an
Okay.
idea back in the fall. I think he had brought up
Okay.
that idea of making it, whether or not you could, like you said,
Right.
purchase some of the
Campus.
property and make it one campus, and that
Right.
was an idea.
And that's not on the table anymore, or?
The NESDEC report, again, it's
Okay.
best use of facilities.
Sure,
So they're gonna take a look at all of our square footage, the number of classrooms we have, the programs that we have, and I anticipate they'll give us several different options about what we might wanna think about. In the use of this campus, I'm gonna guess is gonna be part of that.
okay.
And as far as the committee, because I'm such a slacker, we've not actually even formally presented the charter for the committee to the board, but in all of our conversations, when Eric and I have been discussing with each other and with the folks that we've been meeting with, we've been clear, it's ultimately the board's authority that establishes, but we believe that renovate, consolidate, and build should all be on the table, that it should be a comprehensive evaluation of the options. It shouldn't be just Greenwood Acres or Sisters, it should be a more comprehensive picture of what the options are.
Okay. And then I do have one last thing. The book that you have been wanting everybody to read, you were kind enough to give it to me. But I was reading some of it and everything. And are you trying to have the staff follow the book on how the school is run and how they're?
So great question, great question. I can give you the book that the staff will be using to start with, because this book is a little dense, and it's systemic, and it's a broad picture piece. So, but the book the staff gets, it's Making Thinking Visible, is really very concrete with strategies you can use to promote a culture of thinking in your classroom. So if you stop by, I'll give you the other book too, because that one is really, there is some tangible, why teachers like it is because they can read it and use it the very next day.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm concerned because the book is things that I want to say the white office over there doesn't follow. So it's going to be very hard to try to not dictate, but tell people to read these books when a lot of it in the book is not followed yet through the White House over there. So I think it needs to all come together if we're going to promote that book or the book and how we do things within the district. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to publicly thank you for coming and meeting with me.
Okay, thank you for having me.
I appreciate you doing it. I certainly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Anything further from the public? All right, with that being.
Can I just add on?
Yes,
that?
please.
I'm obviously gonna hold off on all the mask debating until we actually have a proposal to vote on. But I do think that what Heidi's articulating is exactly what we're going to hear. I'm not entirely certain that our daughter will be at Lakeway in the fall if masks are required. And I think that's a real risk for everybody, for us to think through. And the problem is, for me, is consistency and discipline to one thing. This board has established already 2 meetings ago that we don't want to follow CDC guidelines, right? I made a series of motions. One of them was seconded, it was voted down. The other 2 were not. All 3 were based on CDC guidance, right? So now the CDC comes out, okay, now we want to follow CDC guidance because we've already changed your proposal, which came in as a draft on Thursday, already reflects a significant change based on CDC guidance from Friday, right? And so there, I think, is going to be the issue with, it seems like we can't, as a leadership team, make a definitive stance that this is what we're going to do. It seems like we're always just sort of hedging as to what we can get away with. So in the summer, we could get away with masks. Well, now the CDC is going to say something different, but they do have this caveat for local controls. How do we balance it? What's the governor going to say? What's NHDA just going to say? And it's a loaded topic, I think. And I think she very, very clearly articulated what you from the public.
If I can just say something, as a parent, I feel like we're on a roller coaster constantly. And I'm very fortunate my kids can stay home alone and homeschool themselves during this whole thing. But if I had younger students, it would be a mess. I don't know how people do it and not knowing to plan when they have a kindergarten or a first grader. I think you need to have a plan now and move forward to the normalcy, because the kids are living a normal life right now. I don't know. I just think, thinking about going back is just not mentally, it's not right. So it will be a big disappointment if the district decides that way. So, thank you.
Just if I could make some summative comments here, is that I think right now, if everything stays the same, we're gonna come back and life is gonna be pretty normal.
But can't we say that now and just move on?
Can I just finish my point?
Yeah.
I think that that's what's gonna happen. I think if you look at the CDC guidelines, and I can get you a copy of them, they're saying a couple of different things. One they're saying is if you can keep kids separated by 3 feet, that's the best case scenario. The language of you have to do that seems to is not part of their recommendations. They're saying if you have an outbreak in the community and, you need to be doing some masking, then you should do that. But I think we'll come with, I'll try to get all of the people that we said we talked to, I'll come to the board, but the board will certainly, it has to adopt this. So if we expunge any part of that, then that's what happens, and that's what we'll do as a district. But I do think everybody, including the CDC, wants kids to be back in school face to face with their teachers or with their kids. I really think that's.
But as a parent, you're teasing the students that your child right now of a normal life right now. You're teasing them like with something, and now all of a sudden you're gonna have to tell them otherwise. You think we're gonna be going in this way. Make that decision now and stick with it. And if it does happen to go crazy, have that other plan in place, because people will respect that. But right now, with a plan of normalcy, and then telling your kid, well, the district thinks, that's a big difference, and we think we might be able to work a full schedule Monday through Friday, not knowing if our kid is gonna go back to school or not. The kids are normal right now. How can you say in a month from now that we have to tell them different? Why? I don't get it. I just don't get it. And I will argue, and I will bring a full house in here to argue about it, but we need to keep it the way it's going. We shouldn't even be having this discussion anymore. We really shouldn't. You should have 2 plans in place and that's it, and be done. An emergency plan, just like a fire drill. That is it, and move on. Because right now you have, I don't know how many enrolled in summer school that are living a normal life at school. And you're gonna tell them, come fall, possibly you think that you might have to wear a mask or stay 3 feet apart from your friends. Or at a basketball game or a soccer game, you're gonna have to wear your mask. It's not happening.
I don't think I would frame it that way. I think I'd frame it as we're coming back to school.
But let's do it now. Let's not wait 3 weeks from now. Why aren't we doing it now? Why aren't we getting that notice out now?
Well, because I think you have to be thoughtful and deliberate, because it's all of the people that are gonna appreciate that message want to know if things go south, what's your plan? And I think we need to present those together. But I'm with you 110%. I want to be able to stand up in the community and say, we're opening the doors and life is going to be normal.
So what's the policy in place right now for the summer school program if it haywires with 20 kids down at Lakeway that get whatever, COVID?
Yeah,
What happens? Is the plan in place?
Reopening plan and implement that.
I'm sorry?
We have to go back to the reopening plan that we have and implement that.
So why aren't we implementing that for the fall then? Just go with that and be done with it.
Because if we did that, it would be more restrictive than what the CDC guidelines are. So I'd rather edit that document to have.
And what is the
less
deadline that
restrictive.
you're giving the district
I'm
of
sorry.
having that done? When is the deadline that you're gonna give us as parents or
Well, we
students?
were just talking about trying to present that to the board on the 9th
Of August?
of August.
So that's 2 weeks before school starts.
It is. We don't have.
And
enough
if you
ability.
want to district your child, your student out of the district or find other ways of education for your student, you're giving the public taxpayers 2 weeks to find other options because we do not agree with what you're offering if we do go back to full mask. So 2 weeks is not appropriate for people for planning.
I think you're focusing on the worst case scenario.
I am because I don't like the word assume or think of that in this whole situation because it could go both ways. And I'm concerned, and I really think we really need to make a decision real quick on what we're gonna do for the fall. At A and B. You go with A, and if it's that bad, you go with B. You have that connected.
I think we're saying the same thing.
So if you don't, if, I'm just gonna, I guess, as board chair, I'm gonna ask the board for consensus on this. And that is that we ask Dr. Hart and his administrative team to come up with a announcement to families as to the intention of opening normal without masks, without restrictions other than what is mandated by Department of Ed or Department of Health and Human Services. And that there will be a contingency plan in place should we have, and I don't want to say worst case scenario because there could be many levels of worst case scenario that could cause us to have to adapt that program for whatever reason. But I guess I'd like to get board consensus on whether or not we can task Dr. Hart and his administrative team to come up with some type of announcement sooner than our next board meeting to give families that comfort level or that at least window of opportunity. And then, like you said, on April 9th, present us with your plan, which will include two pieces. It will include the intention to open as with normalcy and the plan, a secondary plan for times when it may warrant more restrictive policies due to a rise in cases or a change in COVID in the community or in the state or wherever in the area.
And I don't know, I mean, have we looked at the other districts in the local area, like Lisbon and Profile, what their plans are?
Yeah, we've all submitted our plans to the state. People haven't, at least right now, posted some substantially different plans than the reopening, but all of us are in the same situation. We're all working on what that plan should look like.
So Dr. Hart, do you feel like you're in a place where you can commit to having the final draft for public transmittal by 2 weeks from today? And then that would give folks some time to absorb and maybe ask questions via email or whatever in preparation for the meeting on the 9th.
So final draft, is that what you said, Matt?
Yes.
So did you hear that?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
So what are the dates there?
So the 26th of July would be final draft and still the board meeting for vote on August 9th.
So I'd send it out to the board and then,
And to the public, I would say, on the 26th, that this is the reopening plan that's being presented for discussion and, I don't know, what we call it, ratification or whatever.
And noted as a draft that it has not been adopted or it has not been approved.
yeah,
And then other
we
than
can do that. I mean, it's a truncated process and, that's always can be a challenge. And, but I will get, if that's what the board wants me to do, we will have something posted for the public by the 26th.
that sound fair to the board as a draft?
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to enter into non-public, please.
Well, you two.
It's right
I
here.
don't read.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.
I'll do it. I'm making a motion to enter into non-public session for paragraph 2, section 3 of the RSA 91A, colon 3 of the right to know law for 2. Yep. 2, the hiring of any person as a public employee.
And then 3.
And 3, matters which if discussed in public would likely adversely affect the reputation of any person other than a member of this board.
So anything in regards to the superintendent's discretion?
Yes.
Is that another number on there? Yeah, does that fall into a different number? Is that still qualified under 2 and 3?
That's 2 and 3. 2 and 3.
Still falls into 2 and 3,
Yes.
okay.
taking with us the superintendent.
Sheena.
And Sheena.
Yep.
And that's it, right?
Yep.
That's it.
Could I have a second, please?
I'll second it.
And second? All in favor? Aye.
Roll call vote.
Oh, roll call vote for non-public. That's right, oh yeah, thank you.
Wow, good job.
Good job, Dale.
Sorry,
Roll call
that's-
vote, so we have to do roll call vote for non-public, it's the only vote we have to do a roll call on when we're not on Zoom. We did, I remember we used to do that.
Eric Antonucci.
And Wiggett.
Everybody's done.
Glad to say that.
Greg Cook, motion passes 5-0. Thanks, it's been a long time since that's the only roll call we've had to do.
Sorry, I gotta go.
Thank you.
Can't find it.